What a great pleasure to get to join you today. It was a real honor for me to be a small part of this book, Opportunities Beyond Carbon, and I wish mightily that I were on hand for the conference and get to be with my fellow authors and the people who will be speaking with you today. I'm out around the globe this year, and it's that story of why I'm out around the globe that I will use to kind of explain our movement to you and the opportunities it gives for moving beyond carbon and into a much, much, much more interesting future. But before we get to that more interesting future, a few depressing notes to set the context, to explain why this has become so urgent so fast. I wrote the first book on climate change 20 years ago, and I've gotten to follow the debate as it's developed over those 2 decades. As you know, the strong consensus about global warming deepened year after year after year. But about 18 months ago, that consensus turned into a kind of panic, at least among scientists at the cutting edge of this work. The reason was that the world was clearly changing more quickly and on a larger scale than we had anticipated. Global warming was speeding up and spreading out. The most obvious sign of this probably was the rapid melt of Arctic sea ice in the summer of 2007, but not the only one. The quick collapse of permafrost in much of the far north, and with it the escape of methane into the atmosphere. The dramatic death of huge swaths of forest across Canada and Siberia, on and on and on, all reminded us not only of how quickly the Earth is warming, but how desperately dangerous it is to let it go on much longer, because these feedback loops are beginning to get out of human control. We have no practical way of refreezing the Arctic, even if we stop driving tomorrow. And because we can't refreeze the Arctic, that blue seawater is absorbing much more of the sun's energy than the white ice that used to bounce most of it back to space. There are dozens of other examples like that. They add up to a number, the most important number in the world, a number we didn't even know 18 months ago. In the wake of that Arctic sea ice melt, our foremost climatologist, NASA's James Hansen and his team, went back to work looking not only at the observational data, but also at the reams of paleoclimatic data we now have, ancient ice cores and things. What they said when they were done, a conclusion that's been supported now by many other researchers, is that 350 represents the kind of red line. Any value for carbon in the atmosphere greater than 350 parts per million, they said in the abstract of a peer-reviewed scientific paper, is not compatible with the planet upon which civilization developed or to which life on Earth is adapted. That's strong language. It's especially strong language when you remember that we're above that level already at 387 parts per million and rising. That's why the Arctic is melting. That's why we're seeing so much of this change. We've gone too far already. This is not a future problem. It has to be solved now. People in Australia may have a more visceral sense of this than elsewhere. Scientists around the world point to Australia and the high Arctic as prime examples of what's going on, of what climate change looks like in its early phases. The rapid drying of rivers, the extreme heat and aridity that contributed to the hideous bushfires earlier this year, those are what global warming looks like in its early stages. It's very early stages. So far we've raised the temperature of the planet 1 degree. If we do not get our act together very quickly, scientific consensus is that before the century is out, that number will be more like 4 or 5 degrees, that we will live on an entirely different world, one close to uninhabitable. What 350 means is urgency, is the need for action now, deep action now, for paying attention not just to political realities, but to physical and chemical realities, to obeying the limits that the earth places on us, the constraints under which we live, like it or not. And that's one reason that we're building this big 350.org movement, to put real pressure on our governments prior to Copenhagen to do what needs to be done, to go in the direction that we have to go. But the other reason, of course, is that the future on the other side of carbon is not only possible to imagine, it's quite sweet to imagine. A world where we've moved away from 18th century technology, the burning of coal, and towards technologies much better suited to our planet and to our communities, taking advantage of the diffuse and widespread sources of energy like sun and wind and geothermal and tidal power, all the things with which Australia in particular is peculiarly blessed. How are we going to get there? We're going to get there if we're able to finally impose the price on carbon that it clearly carries in the atmosphere. The moment that we stop treating it as a free good to be dumped into the atmosphere is the moment we'll really get serious about dealing with this problem. It's the moment at which we'll unleash the market to do its work on carbon. If we send a strong price signal, then there is the hope that entrepreneurship and innovation will be prime players in helping lead us out of this particular canyon into which we've stumbled. Getting that price on carbon is the sine qua non of any effective action, and it's why we have to build a big movement. At 350.org, we're organizing all over the planet. We have offices in every continent and in dozens of places. We've got tremendous networks, especially of young people, young climate activists around the world. It's inspiring to see them taking the lead, and inspiring to see just how many people of all ages, of all cultures, of all faiths are organizing for our great day of global action on the 24th of October. That's going to be a day for truth-telling, a day when all around the world, thousands of locations, people take this number and try to drive it into the human heart and the human mind to make it clear the scale on which we need change. There will be climbers high in the Himalayas. There'll be scuba divers on the Great Barrier Reef. There'll be people on Easter Island. There'll be rallies in big cities. There'll be teams of 350 bike riders out riding 350 kilometers. There'll be hundreds or thousands of churches ringing their bells 350 times. There will be every sort of gathering that you can imagine. In Australia, so many players have already joined to help make this possible. The Australia Youth Climate Coalition and Get Up and Greenpeace and the Climate Institute, and on and on and on through the whole who's who of the excellent Australian environmental movement, especially all those people with strong grassroots local ties that will really make this happen. The same all over the world. It's very exciting to see it, to see just in time perhaps human beings awakening to the peril around us. It's important to understand that we have to take these political steps before we can get to the huge panoply of solutions that are out there. Until we place a price on carbon, most of the technology that we need to change is going to be stillborn. The first step is to change the economic force of gravity. At the moment, cheap coal makes almost everything else impossible. The minute that coal is no longer so cheap, then everything else will become much more reasonable, and we'll start to move with the economic wind at our backs, move quickly into a new era of low-carbon technology that offers not only the prospect of a clean future, but also the one real prospect for building large numbers of jobs as we build a vast new industry, as we re-energize the entire planet to take advantage of green power, not dirty power. That's the enormous transition that we can see in the years ahead, but only if in time we manage to do the organizing and the movement building to force that action. That's what this year is about more than anything else, and we're extraordinarily grateful to people's help and collaboration with 350.org. We're trying to move for the first time really globally on these questions. Everybody has to play a role. No country can solve this problem by themselves. Together we can put enough pressure from around the world on everyone that we might persuade our leaders to finally hold hands and jump together into this new world that they need to go. That's our only real hope. At the moment, we don't have the political power to match the money and influence that comes from old and tired industries. We need to assemble that as quickly as we can, which is why we're building so hard toward October 24th at 350.org. There are, and here I will end, enormous opportunities beyond carbon. To get to those opportunities, to open the door for them, we need a political movement now. And it is a great pleasure to be working with you all to build that kind of movement. Thank you very much.